It's funny, we always talk about Amazon being so much more than just online shopping, right? This deep dive into the ecosystem economy really helped me get why that is. Like, it's not an accident. It actually feels like this is how businesses are going to work in the future.
Yeah, yeah.
And what really clicked for me was, well, the excerpt uses supermarkets as an example. And I think everyone gets supermarkets. That's relatable.
It's a really smart comparison, I think. I mean, for years, businesses were like those like old kind of specialty shops, right? Each one was just like one thing. But now we're starting to see this big shift towards these interconnected ecosystems where like companies are like, hey, let's work together. And they offer this whole range of services and they're all in one place. It's like, just like supermarkets totally changed how we shop for food, this whole ecosystem model is changing the entire way businesses work.
It's pretty wild to think about.
Yeah.
And what's even crazier is that Disney was kind of onto this whole ecosystem idea back in the 20th century.
Really?
The excerpt even talks about it. They have theme parks, movies, merchandise. It all just worked together. It makes sense, but I don't know why I never put it together that way before.
Yeah, Disney was definitely way ahead of their time, I'll give them that. But their whole model back then was about owning like the whole experience, top to bottom. Today's ecosystems, they're different. They're more about creating a central hub. It's like a platform where other companies can kind of connect and work together.
So less about like being a control freak and more about being the ultimate connector.
Exactly. Think about Apple and their App Store.
Yeah.
They don't make every single app, right?
Right.
But they built this awesome platform where developers can like do their thing and reach tons of people.
Yeah.
It's good for everyone. Apple, the people making apps, and us, the people using them.
And the excerpt mentioned that Apple's App Store was a turning point. Like Microsoft tried something similar, but Apple really like figured out the ecosystem. What did they do differently that made such a big impact?
I think they understood that to make this work, they had to shift things up. Instead of trying to control everything, they were like, hey, let's empower others to create cool stuff on our platform. And this like attracted all these developers and made the App Store the place to go for mobile apps. And well, the rest is history.
That's really interesting. It sounds like understanding these power shifts within ecosystems is like essential for businesses to survive, right? Not just these big tech companies, but any business.
You got it. And there are a few things driving this whole shift toward ecosystems. First off, technology is changing so fast. We've got smartphones, the cloud, AI, and these incredible tools let companies connect and collaborate in ways we've never seen across totally different industries.
Yeah.
It's kind of blowing up those old boundaries.
And it's more than just the technology itself, right? It's how technology changes what we expect. Like as consumers, we expect things instantly, we want personalized experiences, and we want it all right now.
Exactly. You hit the nail on the head. And that brings us to the third thing, platforms. Things like app stores, those online marketplaces, all the big social media sites, they've created this massive network effect that connects businesses and consumers on a scale we've never seen before.
And these platforms are only getting bigger, right? More influential.
Absolutely. The more users and businesses that join, the more powerful these platforms get.
Yeah.
It creates this cycle where the business is stuck in the old ways of doing things.
Yeah.
They're having a really hard time keeping up.
Yeah, it's true. Okay, so now let's talk about the future, because the excerpt doesn't stop at just explaining what's happening now, right? It actually gives us a little peek into what could be. It's almost like straight out of science fiction.
All right. It's pretty exciting. This excerpt talks about like hyper-personalized everything, platforms all connected, a world where, honestly, data is king.
Wild, right.
Just imagine for a second, a future where your fridge orders your groceries. It knows what you like, what you need. Or your car drives itself through traffic while you're catching up on work or, watching something fun.
Okay, that does sound pretty awesome, but also kind of scary. What about like all my data? Is it safe? I love the idea of my house, like reading my mind and knowing what I need before I do.
Sure.
But then I think, who else is going to know all that stuff?
Yeah, no, I get it. It's definitely, it's a trade-off, big potential benefits. For sure. Huge. But we got to think about the downsides too. And this excerpt, it doesn't try to hide from that. It really stresses how important regulations are. And ethics. Like, who owns your data? How is it being used? Big questions.
It's almost like a philosophical debate, right? Are we cool with giving up some privacy to make life easier? Who gets to decide where that line is,
It's the big question, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
It's complicated. No simple answers, that's for sure. We definitely need to keep talking about it.
For sure. And we've talked a lot about companies, but what about government? They got to be involved in all this, right?
Right.
The excerpt talks about regulations. What's the main takeaway there?
This excerpt makes it really clear. We need government regulation if we're going to make this whole ecosystem economy work. It's about finding that sweet spot where we're encouraging innovation, letting things grow, but also protecting people, making sure these ecosystems don't turn into these massive monopolies that crush competition and take away our privacy.
So we can't just let these ecosystems run wild, right? We need to be smart and make sure they help everyone.
100%. This excerpt really argues that we get to decide what the future looks like. It's not set in stone. Governments, businesses, and all of us. We decide if this new world is fair and if everyone benefits, not just a select few.
This deep dive is really making me look at things differently. Before, I thought about businesses like each one is separate. Now I see them as part of this web, this huge interconnected ecosystem.
Yeah, totally. It's a whole new way of looking at the world. And this excerpt really nails it, explaining the things pushing this change and what it might mean for us in the future.
So this excerpt is great at the big picture stuff, like the global trends. But what about real-world examples? How are specific industries being affected by all of this?
That is such a good point. And yeah, the excerpt does give us some really interesting glimpses into how this whole ecosystem thing is playing out in different sectors.
Like what? Give me some examples.
Okay, take healthcare, for example. They talk about this future where all your health info is shared between doctors, hospitals, insurance companies. Everyone's on the same page, right? They say this could lead to treatments that are way more personalized, and preventative care gets even better, so we stay healthier longer.
That part does sound pretty amazing. But what about discrimination? Like, they have my whole health history. Could they use that against me?
Right. And those are exactly the kinds of things we need to be thinking about. The excerpt doesn't shy away from those tough questions. It says straight up, we got to address these ethical concerns head on, especially as these health ecosystems become more and more powerful. It's not just about what the technology can do, but how we use it responsibly.
Exactly. Okay, what about transportation? They mentioned self-driving cars, which, cool, but that's just one part of it, right?
Exactly. They're saying self-driving cars are just a piece of a much bigger puzzle.
Yeah.
Like, we're talking about a whole transportation ecosystem that could completely change how we get around.
So in the future, transportation will be all connected, right?
Right.
Ride sharing, buses, trains, deliveries, everything working together.
You got it. Imagine you pull out your phone, order a ride, and this self-driving car picks you up. But it's not just any ride. It's plugged into your calendar, knows where you got to be and when. You could literally work, relax, even take a nap on your way to your next appointment.
Now that's the life. But what about jobs? All those taxi drivers, truck drivers, delivery drivers, are those jobs just going to disappear?
That's another one of those really important questions. And the excerpt really makes you think about that. It's not just about can we do this, it's what happens when we do. How do we make sure everyone benefits? How do we avoid leaving people behind?
Right. Okay, last one. Food. They briefly mentioned food production. Is there an ecosystem angle there too?
You bet. They talk about this thing called precision agriculture, where they use sensors and drones and AI to grow more food with less waste.
Wow.
And not just that, they say this tech could be used to actually personalize our food to match individual dietary needs and preferences.
So healthier and more personalized.
Exactly. And it gets even better. They say these food ecosystems have the potential to tackle big problems like world hunger and malnutrition, especially in developing countries.
It really makes you think about how connected everything is becoming.
It is, yeah.
Yeah.
And I think this excerpt really highlights that, how we're all kind of woven together. But more than that, it highlights the potential here. We're standing on the edge of something massive, a whole new world,
Totally. But we don't just have to sit back and watch it happen, right?
Yeah.
This excerpt says we can actually help shape this whole ecosystem future.
100%. This is not a spectator sport. The excerpt actually lays out a whole, strategic planning process for businesses to help them navigate this new landscape. It's actually really practical.
Oh, interesting. So what's the SparkNotes version?
Yeah.
What are the key things businesses should be doing?
So first things first, you got to understand your customer, right? What do they need? And more importantly, how are those needs going to change as technology keeps advancing?
So don't just look at where things are now, but where they're going.
Exactly. Anticipate what's next. The second thing is, you got to scope out the competition. Who are the big players in your ecosystem? What are they good at? What are they not so good at? What's the playing field look like?
So important to know who you're up against?
Yeah. And then, this is the million-dollar question. What's your role in all of this? Do you want to be the orchestrator, like Apple with their App Store, bringing everyone together? Or are you more of a participant, plugging into an existing platform to reach more people?
So finding your lane, figuring out what works for you?
Exactly. And finally, you got to build the skills, the tools to make it all happen. Maybe that's new tech, new partnerships, or even like changing how your company works from the inside out.
So it's not just about like having a good idea. You really got to transform to thrive in this environment.
Yeah, you got to be ready to adapt. This is not business as usual.
I have to say, this deep dive has given me a lot to think about. My brain's kind of buzzing right now. The way I see business, the way I see technology, it's different now.
That's awesome to hear. And that's what's so cool about this excerpt. It reminds us that the future isn't, pre-programmed or whatever. We have a say in this. We can build a future that works for everyone.
Yeah. It's exciting to think that we can all be part of creating this new world that's not just successful, but fair.
Absolutely. This excerpt encourages us to be well-informed, be engaged, and don't be afraid to get your hands dirty and make things happen.
This deep dive has been incredible. Thanks so much for breaking down this whole ecosystem economy thing for us. Super insightful.
Always a pleasure. And hey, to everyone listening, keep asking those good questions. Stay connected and stay curious, and you'll be just fine in this exciting, always changing world.